Well, hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Doctors Living Deliberately. Thank you so much for being with us today. And of course, welcome to my co-host. Hi, Arpita.
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
Doing great and excited for our episode today where we get to chat with some of the clients that we work with, physicians who have embraced physician coaching so that they can tell a little bit of their story and what coaching has meant to them. And we've both invited some familiar faces here with us today and excited to get to chatting. What about you?
Super excited. Just always, again, thankful to have clients and have the opportunity to help other people in a different way than conventional medicine for myself. And I'm just really, really excited to hear what each person has to say today in terms of their own personal experiences with it. I think before we jump in, maybe we can just go around and have each person say a little bit about themselves and maybe what was their turning point to help where they got to where they recognized that something needed to change, and then maybe how we found coaching and why we considered coaching as that opportunity to make that change. So I will just pick the first person in my order if that's okay, and that's James. That's you. So please share with us, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. So, my name is James. I'm a urologist, and I guess my story is one that's probably consistent with everybody else's. I found coaching. I was kind of at the in 3 or 4 years of practice and discovered a group coaching program and tried it out and really liked it. But I after I completed it, felt like it was kind of missing something. I was missing that one-on-one attention. And then through the good fortune of a mutual friend that introduced me to Michael, I started working with Michael. I think about 3 years ago now. My math could be off. And yeah, it's really been great. I think about my thoughts 3 years ago compared to my thoughts now are 180 degrees different and in a very positive way. And so I've found much more balance and peace with where I'm at right now, both professionally and certainly with home and with relationships.
Amazing, amazing. Tiffany, my love, tell me a little bit about yourself, or tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Tiffany. I am a family medicine physician, and I learned about coaching when I did a women physician wellness conference. I was feeling burned out by my career and frustrated kind of with family dynamics that were going on. So I started coaching with Arpita, and life looks a lot different than it did just a few months ago, but really able to make some changes with my career. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Tiffany. Mahesh, my dear, tell us all the things.
All the things. Hi, good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. I'm Mahesh. I'm a family physician. I am a wife. I'm a mother. I'm an avid reader. I'm a recovering perfectionist. And my journey to coaching, I would say, I think the pandemic, that was when I first was browsing all these virtual conferences and came across coaching. And then I joined a group program. And from there, I felt the same, as someone else said, I just felt like I needed some one-on-one. And I think I worked with Arpita last year, if I'm right. It was last year, it was in 2023. Right now, I'm not in any coaching at all. It's more of I've pulled back to look at what the next step is. But I feel the impact of coaching almost every day. I know that my thoughts are not really me, and I'm able to separate. And I can look at things, I can self-coach a bit. It's just improved my quality of life, and it's also improved the quality of my thoughts even, because I can recognize and I can change them around a bit.
Amazing. So good. All right, Manas, please share who you are and how you found the amazing Michael Hersh and why you went to him.
Sure. By the way, it's really great to be on the podcast because I told Michael this, but I listen to the podcast regularly. So when I'm meeting you, I'm like, oh, I'm meeting like a podcast celebrity because you only know somebody. I don't watch YouTube. I listen, on my drives. So I'm like, oh, I'm getting to talk to Arpita, which is kind of fun. But My name is Manas Nigam. I'm a reconstructive surgeon. I just started my second year of practice. I live in Virginia Beach and I'm an employed physician. And how I got into coaching was that there's a lot of challenges in residency that I was like, man, it would have been great to just bounce this off of somebody who I wasn't directly connected with at work. And then obviously you can only talk to your significant other so much about, what's going on at the hospital. So with that, I was coming into new practice and there's just a lot to learn outside of just this sheer practice of medicine by itself. There's all, family is really important to me and I want to start prioritizing some things that you don't necessarily prioritize when you're in training. But I also want to make sure that patients feel good about their care and I'm not getting caught up in things on the back end. So there are pulls administratively, there are pulls in building your own practice, there are pulls to things outside of the practice of medicine. So Michael Hersh has been a really important voice to me outside of this other community that's really important to give me not necessarily his own perspective, but help me to maybe turn an outward lens into the things going on in my personal life and my professional life.
So when you first found coaching, since you're chatting, we'll just kind of start the conversation here. Did you have any skepticism around it? Did you have any doubts about kind of what coaching was or how it might help?
So I think that the doubts that I had was that I was a bit worried that I needed to, my coach is a physician and we're a community of physicians. So I was worried that I need to project myself in a certain way. There's all these preconceived notions that, I'm in surgery and surgery, the traditional mindset, and hopefully that's changing is, show no weakness, show no vulnerability. So, you get worried, oh, am I being judged? And I think Michael could tell in the beginning when I would say, what do you think? That I think this way or feel this way. And I mean, since that point, he's convinced me that, and I think that this is my own internal programming that I feel like I am quote unquote being judged or, categorized, but that was my reservation. And then I was worried about displaying vulnerability.
I think that's huge for so many physicians. We're all trained not to be vulnerable, to kind of have these facades on at all times to show no weakness. And I think that takes its toll over time. The never really being able to kind of go back to the traumatic thing that happened, right? We've referred to this before in another podcast episode where this horrible thing happens in Bay 1, and then you have to spend no time processing it, put a smile back on your face and head into Bay 2 and pretend like nothing happened. And I think kind of learning to embrace the vulnerability and see kind of what happens when you allow yourself to feel all the things, how that changes your life. Mahesh, what about you? Did you have any kind of skepticism when you first initially found coaching or any thoughts about it before you actually embarked on coaching?
I think before I started, maybe it was cost. When I first was like, oh, this is expensive. And, you're not used to spending so much money on like something that's self-improvement. So that was initially. And then once I saw the program, the first one that was then, which is a group program, and then I started seeing all these, it was mostly women. And when they started talking, I was like, oh my goodness, they're sharing so many, I don't think I can do this where I can share all this stuff about myself and like actually like sitting and looking deep inside. I mean, it's uncomfortable. So my first thing was always, before knowing what coaching was, maybe cost, but once into it, it was being vulnerable was hard.
Jimmy, how did you deal with that, the vulnerability aspect of coaching? You said you started with a group program and then kind of transitioned to one-to-one. So how did you deal with kind of the vulnerability aspect of coaching?
Yeah, so with the group program, where I struggled was actually I felt like I wanted to get vulnerable in order to get the most out of it, but I didn't want to put myself in that public vulnerable position. And that's where I think, with this group program that I was part of, we did some one-on-one sessions, and I found those much more valuable than the group program itself. And then I really kind of pivoted to doing just strictly one-on-one. And I think part of my initial, even still, concern that my needs wouldn't be met were really based around the fact that, well, I'm a urologist, I have a pretty specialized focus of practice, and maybe my coach may not fully understand what I'm going through or what's unique to me, my situation. And very quickly, I think, Michael, you did a great job of kind of dispelling that myth, and that, the issues that surround all of us, whether your family practice, reconstructive surgery, urology, are really germane to medicine and germane to humanity. And so as soon as I understood that and put that bias down, I was able to get a lot more out of it.
Tiffany, I'm going to let you tell us your side in terms of I think this is your first experience with coaching, but I might be wrong. And so tell us a little bit about your original thoughts about what it is, if it's really going to even work, any doubts you had.
Yeah, so this was my first experience with coaching. At the WPW conference that I went to, you lectured there, and so I connected with your story, and I remember reaching out to you, and we did a small group session at that conference, and I realized kind of at the small group session that group coaching wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. Just didn't feel as comfortable sharing all the details of things that I wanted to work on in a group setting. But we connected after that and did an intro session. I was hesitant about the cost initially because it is costly. However, after talking with my husband, we kind of agreed that that was the next step of what I needed to do. And so I went for it, and really, with the changes that I was able to make in my career and the changes I was able to make with my contract, like I paid for that cost with the increase in income that I was able to make with renegotiating my contract with my employer.
And I would offer that this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I think you guys, I think Mahesh, you also brought up a very good point that the costs, a lot of times people find it so prohibitive. They're like, what the heck is this voodoo that I'm paying for, right? It's just, who's going to pay for that? And that again goes to speak to what we don't know, like how much of what we don't know and how powerful this work actually is when you dive into it. Because if we're willing to spend that much money on, I don't know, refurbishing your house or taking care of the kids or taking trips to build your wellness, whatever it is, our mind is our most valuable asset. And when we start to learn how to kind of cultivate that in a way that actually serves us best, that is the most valuable thing that I think you can invest your money in. But it's a great point. And we didn't cue them to talk about the cost. They all brought it up on their own.
Well, but here's the thing, right? I mean, everybody that is speaking right now pays for coaching, right? Or has paid for coaching. And it can be something that holds people back. And male physicians in particular, this was my story. I didn't want to spend money on anything that I did not absolutely need to be spending money on, because I needed to save as much money and get out of medicine, right? Like that was my story. And what I realized was, yes, I was doing all of that and I was miserable in the process. And we talk about investments. What's the right investment? How am I going to grow, my financial stability? And for me, part of growing my financial stability was learning how to enjoy my life, because I could be so much more financially stable when I was happy and enjoying my life and saying yes to the things I wanted to do and no to the things that I didn't. And yes, it required an investment, but so do most things, right? And it just so happened that the investment that I needed to make was in my personal well-being. And I hadn't really considered that before I found coaching. And so, yes, the cost was prohibitive when I first found it. And my initial response when I was joining my first program was no, I was not going to do it. And when I allowed myself to do it, everything changed. It was probably the most important investment I've ever made.
Yeah, I would say, and Tiffany, not to no means to minimize, I think what happened with regards to your progress within the first 8 weeks, it was just, again, a complete shift in your mindset with how you were approaching the situation and just truly just having the belief that you were valuable, right? Because I think a lot of times physicians, we don't think that we're worth anything, like that we should be speaking up or being the squeaky wheel, or we just think that, oh my God, if I say something, they're going to fire me or they're going to find somebody else. We don't recognize our worth. And that belief totally needs to be blown out of the water that we're not worthy or we're not worthy of more, because we are pretty damn worthy and valuable. But I would love, Tiffany, for you to go on to talk about a little bit here is maybe describing how your life has changed so far. I mean, I know we're kind of actually pretty early on in our time together, but how your life has changed and how you've already seen some changes in how it's impacting those around you in your life.
Yeah. So I'll just add to your point of I had that negative belief of my employer would never negotiate. And so once I changed my thoughts about that and learned how to negotiate, that was a game changer for me. It was also just a game changer of at my job, my happiness, and kind of thinking about my on-site staff, how to kind of work with them to help improve the culture in my office. So that's kind of one area that I've been working on, and it's been awesome to see the changes in my office staff. They're happier because of the things that I'm doing there to help kind of change the culture. And then the other aspect is really prior to coaching, I always felt angry about things that weren't done or weren't done how I liked it. And changing my mindset on that was really powerful. Sorry, I have barking dogs.
It's all good. We all have life and barking dogs. Mine are actually quiet for some reason right now. They're normally going crazy too. Well, thank you. Manas, tell us how you would maybe describe how it's impacted your life now and how it's impacted the lives of those around you, closest to you.
So I guess I'd probably put this into like 3 buckets. So first is personally, like dealing around just how personal, it's like the sheer practice of medicine is actually really, really hard. A lot of us are perfectionists who perfectionist wannabes or maybe reformed perfectionists, like Hersh was saying, and you come in, you realize the practice of medicine is, you're dealing with people and people's lives and minds and bodies and I mean, you define perfect any way you want, I guess, but that's something that's coming to grips with and realizing, I work at a trauma hospital and people can come in pretty dire situations. And so that, Michael was there for me, even like on an urgent notice and things like that, which is, I think there's a lot of responsibility to being a coach, which I think is often understated because it's a, you're dealing with physicians and the weightiness of their situations at times. But he was there for me when I needed him, which was, I'm not saying to drop your family thing or whatever, but, it was on a timeline that made sense for both of us, but that was really helpful. Second, family wise, I think it's nice because then, my wife's not hearing about every single thing that's going on, my day like this or that or this. But you actually have a colleague outside, like I mentioned before, a colleague outside of your practice or your training, or even your friends sometimes who you can talk to things about, because some things you don't want to bring up with your work colleagues, some things you only want to bring up with your friends. So, and then number 3, I think it's affected my work colleagues, like my team I work with, not just physicians, but other people, because I'll bring up the same concepts that I talk with Michael about in our sessions or from the podcast. And so, for example, like the word of the year, right? So I thought about this, and I know we talked about this last time, and I think I'm following Arpita's rules, but I chose the word gratitude this year. So to remember to be thankful for what you do have and not just focus on, what needs to improve. But then I talked about that with my practice manager, and she said, oh, we're going to do that for everybody. So we'll have everybody do that, and like all the staff and everybody do that. So I thought, so that's, it spills over into other parts of your life too.
That's a great idea. I might have to steal that for my office, Manas. Yes.
I stole your idea, and then you can
I'll steal it back.
steal it back.
No doubt Arpita is beaming that you just referenced her word of the year. No doubt about it.
Oh, good. And not solicited at all.
Oh yeah. There's no check in the mail or anything.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, so funny. Well, so Mahesh, I want you to also tell us, how has it, and it's kind of interesting to hear it from you because you've kind of been through it and it's been a little while. So if you reflect back, what are some of the biggest changes that you maybe are still even keeping in place, and how has that also impacted the others in your life?
I don't know that I can just concretely say that this is what happened and this is what happened, but there's a lot of overlap in what everyone is saying. So I was just thinking, I have the same word spills into parenting, friends, and patient is something that I made note of when I took the questions and looked at the questions, and he's saying the same thing. Manas was saying the same thing about spilling over into, so I noticed it spilling over. Arpita was, I know that I've texted you I love the surprise text. So listen to this podcast episode or something, or she'll read a nice poem and like send it to me or something. I mean, this reminded me of you. Those were the personal touches that made it more than it's just being in a program that, this is someone who's looking out for me. That, that was really, thank you for that, Arpita, because, that really made it special. I think in my parenting, because that was something we discussed a lot, I've come to notice how I'm behaving with my children, especially my adult son. I mean, that's something you want to be very careful, because with older children and teenagers and older, about what you say and how you treat them, because they're in their developing years themselves. I don't want them to feel like, younger ones I can call, give a cuddle, and then she's like, fine. But the older one is like, okay, they can separate from me a bit. So it helped me a lot with my relationship with my son. At home, I think when I'm angry, it's more the noticing. When I'm angry or when I'm hangry or when when the anger is coming out of fear or things like that, I can recognize it. Before I would just roll with it. Now I can recognize and then pull back, and I'll be like, okay, time out. Or, I take a little bit of time. And so that has been helpful. And then at work, I was always a pretty calm person. I don't think anyone at work would think I would get angry. I don't show it there, but that's what we all do, right? We have this little persona that we put on there, which is not necessarily a false persona, but it's just that we save it for the loved ones in our lives. And they get the not so beautiful parts of us sometimes. And I think that it has helped really with the family.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point that you bring up. The brunt of it gets to the people that we love the most when we're feeling anger or any of the other crappy, shitty emotions. And so for me, like I remember specifically you talking some stories about your son and how you wanted to show up. And, it also resonated with me because that was the main reason for me wanting to make a change in my life, because I was showing up angry all the time with the people that I love the most at home. And so I think the point of this is recognizing where we are not being our best selves, and putting into place actionable steps to help us be our best selves instead in those areas. And it's not that we're going to be perfect when that happens, but we are getting better. And each time we do have a misstep or I guess, regression into an old behavior. I hate saying regression. I always say that we're going up a spiral, and it's a different scenario with a little bit of a taste of the old version of it that triggers us to react the old way. But that's an opportunity for us to grow and learn and apply what we're building with regards to our awareness to being better next time. So, well, thanks.
And I think also like giving myself grace, like not expecting too much of myself. I cannot see 27 patients and lock every chart and do everything and come home and make dinner and be all available for the children. I just can't. So like, what am I going to do? I mean, is it instead of getting angry and then getting angry at myself because I disappointed myself, it's more about, okay, maybe it's takeout tonight and let me sit.
Yes.
I also love that you guys are talking about how this spills over into the people around us. But the truth is, you guys spill over into our lives as well. Like Arpita was just mentioning, when she hears people telling stories that resonate with her own story. And I know, James, you and I have worked together for a minute, and a lot of times you are kind of talking about things that I'm like, oh yeah, right. I've totally experienced that also. And I never was able to kind of as concisely as you do kind of summarize it. And we've talked about this before, about how you sometimes inspire some of the stuff that I end up putting out into the world. And so like for you, where have you seen the changes and the growth as you have kind of gone along your coaching journey, which has been for, a couple of years?
Yeah, so I think, for me, it was, when I think back to my version 1.0 was, coming off of, you take your MCAT, you take step 1, 2, 3, get in residency, finish residency, take your board certification. And there's all these, predefined goalposts that you have to hit. And then you enter independent practice, and the only real goalposts out there are the ones that you set for yourself. And that was when I kind of moved into version 2.0. And I didn't know where I wanted this goalpost. And it was a moving target. I would be incredibly upset one day when my schedule wasn't full. And then I'd have a full schedule the next day and be incredibly stressed out that I had a completely full schedule. I remember, a few years ago, on a Friday, having a big surgery just canceled the morning of surgery, or anesthesia canceled the morning of surgery. And I was just so frustrated. And now, if that were to happen, that's a gift. I mean, my weekend starts earlier now. And so, really, where I'm at now, where I was struggling at kind of version 2.0 was with white space, in that the only white space I had on my schedule was on Saturday and Sunday. And then that eroded time with family. And this was all even, pre-COVID and then into COVID. And so what I did was, and Michael was really instrumental in helping me see this, was just create some white space. And so I created some white space in the middle of the week, and the benefit has been tremendous. I pick my kids up at school. I'll meet my wife for lunch. I will, go golfing, do something, a hobby that I enjoy that I would not have done otherwise. And just knowing that I have this buffer room there has really spilled over, obviously, into my family, and that they love it. They're surprised when I pick them up at school one day, or my wife when I, ask her if she wants to do lunch in the middle of the week. It's also spilled over, obviously, into my coworkers, and that they now have a little bit of breathing room in the middle of the week. And I think I'm a better physician, to my patients as a result of it. So I think where I'm at now is much, much more balanced. But I think where the coaching was really instrumental was getting me to that point to say, it's okay to scale back or to rearrange your schedule. And an interesting thing happened, and I think this is really the benefit of physician coaching, is Michael is able to kind of understand and say, listen, what's going to happen is your other days of the week are just going to become much, much more full and much, much more efficient. And that's really what you want. And, I don't think a non-physician coach would be able to, take off their physician hat and say, here's my experience with this. And so I think the experience part that Michael was just mentioning is really a two-way street. Michael's a great coach, and at times he's also able to take off his hat and say, as a physician, here's what I did, and here's why I think it would work, and here's a strategy that you might want to try.
I think those are excellent little tips. I mean, because that's the, I guess, the humanness of these interactions, that we can bring the experiences that we've had to our clients as well. And they get to pick and choose which ones they want to take on for themselves, which ones are going to be applicable and work for them, and which ones are not. And even if they're ideas or thoughts that may not work for them, oftentimes it's a little bit of a spark to get them thinking about other ways that it could potentially be molded to work for them. So I think that's really the whole point of how coaching works, is we're here to kind of be a sounding board, to hear what you're saying and then really question it with like some uncomfortable questions sometimes, to make you guys think hard about, is this really what I want? Is this really in line with what I want to create in my life? And if not, how do I want to be intentional about changing it? What can I do? Even if it's just small little shifts here and there. And I think one of the biggest things that I've really enjoyed doing with my clients is that gratitude practice, because our brains always want to look at all the shit and the crappiness that's going on. It's human nature to do that, to keep ourselves protected and safe and in the best position we can be. And so we don't spend any time, most of us don't spend any time really basking in the good of what we do have in life each day. And even if it's small wins, it matters, because it gives the brain the ability to see that there is good as well.
And then to add, like, you guys also get the benefit of the work that we have done, right? So a lot of times when I'm coaching, I've had to ask myself these same questions, right? I remember, right, also as a proceduralist, I don't get a lunch break, right? Everybody else in my room gets a lunch break. And until I found coaching, I would do procedures from 7:30 in the morning until 5 p.m. without a single break. And I remember going through my own coaching process and realizing, like, I could give myself 30 minutes to eat food in the middle of the day, which, other people would just refer to as lunch. But I actually had to go to bat to get that 30 minutes. I had, managers and people telling me, like, no, this is going to make you more inefficient. This is going to cause all kinds of staffing issues. And I had to figure out for myself, how do I show up in this situation? How do I show up knowing that I'm going to be making fewer RVUs so that I can put food in my face and be happier during my day? And so it is very much a two-way street where we get to kind of not only ask you important questions, but also let you in on some of the experiences that we've had asking ourselves these same questions.
Something that I thought that was really interesting was that, there are preconceived notions that we have in our head, or like beliefs that we have. Like, I didn't even know you could do that. But I'm just learning now that you can carve out space for lunch if that's important to you. So there's these things that you take as truth about how we practice medicine and Michael has told me this. He said, "Oh, is that true? Do you actually feel that way?" And he'll ask it as a question. I said, "Well, I guess that doesn't have to be true." So that's what I think is interesting about this process.
And it's unlearning these habits that have been ingrained in us because we were trained and experienced life a certain way during med school and residency and fellowship and all those things. We were always trained that we celebrate ourselves or take care of ourselves last. The patient comes first, the families come first. And so we have this kind of distorted view that this is what life is supposed to look like, even after we're done with training. And that's just like so false, right? If we don't put ourselves first, to take care of ourselves first, to refill our cups, in whichever way we're choosing to, we are only hurting ourselves and the people that we love the most. And so when you're talking about lunch, Michael Hersh, I mean, it's the same thing with my husband in the office. Like we own the office, but we literally had him running all day. He'd run over, he'd be scarfing down food and then trying to still see patients and multitask. And when we start to recognize that, you know what, this is really unhealthy for us, for our own sustainability, we can start to make those shifts. And so now he says 30 minutes, nobody bother me. My door is shut. I'm eating and all I'm doing is eating. And that was a huge shift. It sounds like such a small thing, but it's a huge shift for physicians to do that, to say, no, I'm out. Nobody can talk to me right now. Because we always want to keep giving and always feel like we have this pressure that we have to always be working and serving others, but we have to serve ourselves first. So
and then, as Manas was alluding to, we start setting examples for the people that work around us, right? So I was the first person to demand like a 30-minute lunch break. And then before I knew it, all of the other endoscopists started, not all of them, but a lot of them started putting 30-minute blocks into their schedule to eat. And so it just goes to questioning those beliefs that we have. Is it true that I don't get 30 minutes to eat lunch? And what if I could?
right, exactly. So I would love to ask you guys what you feel would be the biggest takeaway that you've gotten out of experience, the experience you had with coaching, in terms of how your life has improved, or a big aha moment that you had. Tell us that. And Mahesh, I'll start with you.
Okay, so biggest takeaway. I think the biggest takeaway for me is, like I said before, that my thoughts are not me. Like I can change my thoughts, and I have to help myself in order to be able to help everyone else, because I want to. I want to do that for my family. I want to do that at work. I want to do that for my patients. And in order to be able to heal other people, I have to heal myself first. And that way of like asking myself, is it true?
Mhm.
Just looking at my thoughts. And then the other thing is knowing that I'm human and this is a journey. And I mean, it's not going to get better. This is constant work. Watching and improving is going to be constant work. That's probably what I got from coaching. Just not identifying with whatever was going on inside my head all the time.
Yeah. So true. So amazing. Because I think that was one of the biggest things that I took away too, is that I finally had awareness of how little awareness I had before. And that was like the biggest game changer. Like, oh, holy shit, I can actually think and see, be the observer of what's going on in my brain, and then decide if I really want to keep going that way. So that's powerful. How about you, James?
So I think Michael and I recently had like a aha moment that I discovered, and it was this awareness. I mean, one of the earliest coaching calls I had with Michael was on this scarcity mindset as it related to money. And at the time, much like Michael alluded to earlier, when he had entered practice, it was, I'm just going to grind this out and work my ass off and just basically hit the ejector button when I'm financially independent. And I kind of actually came into coaching with Michael in that mindset. And when we discovered kind of the why, I didn't really know the why. I never really answered the why, or put in the thought work to the why. And I was coming from the scarcity mentality. And then, fast forward a couple of years and, countless coaching sessions later, there was a different theme of this exact scarcity mindset that just kind of came up. And it was on a coaching call a couple of weeks ago where, it was the proverbial light bulb went off and I said, aha, this is, Michael, what this is like? This is just like, and then he kind of chuckled and said, you're absolutely right. And so I didn't have that insight before. And I knew that there was kind of something wrong, but I didn't really know, or maybe I didn't actually know that there was something wrong. And a depressed person knows that they're depressed because they have insight. And, a psychotic person doesn't know that they're psychotic at always. And so I didn't really have that insight and I didn't really think anything was wrong. And now I can kind of sense when something's not quite right. And I have a better job of being able to put my finger on it. So yeah, it was like one of my proudest getting coach moments was that exact moment. Was like, wait a minute, we've talked about this before.
It really is amazing because I think it happens to all of us. If you've done coaching long enough, these issues that we have, they pop up in like there's just a slight different flavor to it. And starting to recognize like, oh, this is that. I've done this before and I know how to get myself out of it. It really is amazing. And it just goes to show how deep-seated some of these, right? I know I very much have to combat my scarcity mindset, right? It has to be intentional. And it is incredible all of the different ways it kind of seeps into my life. And you have to be very curious and suspicious of yourself. Like, why am I feeling this? Why is this coming up for me? Oh, I know what this is. I've done this before. So kudos to you and bravo, because you were able to see it. And that is the awareness piece that we are always talking about. It's so important.
And Manas, I'll let you go next with regards to how you feel like the biggest takeaway, aha moment you've had.
Probably the biggest takeaway to date from my coaching experience that I can actually perceive, there's probably some subconscious things going on, that many of the problems and stress of what we do day to day are not personal problems. The thing is, when I just, finished my training and fellowship, we learn to just, when you're in that position, you just figure out how to get things done. You get things done no matter what system you're working in and what hurdles, like getting the patient home with home care, as an example. But my biggest takeaway is that there's systematic problems inherent to how we do things and, how we finance medicine, how we carry out medicine. And when I say we, I mean just, healthcare as the way the United States has been doing it recently. And these are factors that are bigger than any individual. And so you just do the best you can and then just try to be intentional and just, enjoy that moment you have with the patient, right? Enjoy that moment that you have in the care of the patient. And, enjoy that moment that you're having when you're working with your MA and just try to live each day with intentionality so that you can still derive satisfaction from the work and the lifestyle and the profession that you've chosen so that you don't get hung up on the things that you don't have control over.
And I'll open it up to one last question. Anybody that wants to answer it, or if everybody wants to answer it, if there's somebody out there that is, we'll call it coaching curious, is there any words of wisdom or advice that you would recommend to those people? Is there anything that you would say to somebody who is wondering about coaching but isn't quite sure it's right for them?
I think it's hard to explain to someone exactly. We can say all these things, but they won't know until they try it. So I would be like, don't knock it until you've tried it. Try it and then see if it works for you. And I'm sure it will.
I would just say, we tell patients all the time, like, oh, are you interested in quitting smoking? There's help out there. Or are you feeling depressed? There's help out there. But we don't actually tell them what the help is. And we just know that this proverbial help. And I think, for me, it's for a physician out there that is just kind of need some direction, I guess, to figure out their own direction. And somebody that they need to talk to, and they don't want it to be their spouse. They don't want it to be some practice administrator. They don't want it to be their senior partner. And they've already bounced enough ideas off of their former co-resident. I think coaching is really, really for them, and trying to put all of the professional and domestic and emotional pieces, back in place.
And I'll just add that just start asking, colleagues around you, because chances are maybe they're a closet coachee, and they're not open about it. And so, I mean, I'm pretty open about it with them at my work, but maybe, you'll be surprised at how it's sort of growing. And the second thing that I want to add is that, you can do like a trial session often, a lot of the time, and just to see if it's right for you. So if you're, the financial thing is a consideration, if it's, the cost benefit trade-off's worth it for you. And then the third thing is that a lot of the times it is virtual. So you can do it from the convenience of, even while, you're still at work, you're still at the hospital, or, you're on call. Like we've done sessions while I'm on call, and Michael's been very understanding when I get paged by, somebody's trying to transfer a patient, another hospital trying to transfer a patient, which has been really nice. And so the fourth thing I want to add is that it really does offload the burden, I don't want to say burden, but necessarily like you talking to other loved ones in your life and other, it really creates that space for you to focus on family with your family, focus on being a dad when you're with your kids, focus on trying to be a good spouse when you're with their spouse, and not just saying, this happened or that happened today.
Well, I just want to take a moment to circle back on gratitude and how thankful Arpita and I are for all of you for coming here today, for sharing your stories, for being vulnerable. We appreciate all of you more than you could possibly know. And so just a very sincere and warm thank you for being here, for sharing your story.
Yes, thank you. And I'll also add the biggest gratitude is the fact that you guys trusted the process and trusted it for yourself, because that's what led to the ability for you to even be here today. So thank you for having the open mind to consider this for yourself and make some changes that suited you in a way that made you, and hopefully have gotten you to where you want to be today too. And as we keep moving. So, but yes, thanks for sharing your stories and your experiences. And I hope our audience will get to see some of the benefits of why this is so important.
And if you're listening, if you're in our audience and you're listening and you are coaching curious, take a chance. Book one of those free sessions that Manas was talking about, because there's nothing to lose. And who knows, this just might be the answer you've been looking for.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. And we appreciate your time, and we will see you hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much, and see everybody next time on the next episode of Doctors Living Deliberately. Take care. Bye.